Coming up, mouth taping, sleep hygiene, immunity supplements, and the time I missed my radio show after sleeping through 3 alarm clocks, 7 missed calls, and a taxi driver ringing the doorbell. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Hello again. Good to be back with Zestology. And it's been a big week for me because a few days ago, we got married. Well, actually, we're already married. You might know from listening to the podcast 9 months ago, we got married, but we got married sort of almost in the middle of lockdown, and there were only 3 of us that were able to attend. Me, my wife, and my son. So we had the wedding reception last week. You can probably hear it still in my voice a little bit. It was a big night. It was a big emotional night. And I have to say, I became sort of quite aware of the link between stress and how I feel physically because, you'd think, well, we're already married. What's there to stress about? But I was well aware that I was making a speech and it was one of the biggest speeches of my life. So that was important. And all your family and friends are there. And the added complication of the fact that we were sort of isolating because we thought, well, we better not get COVID because if there's one person that needs to be at our wedding reception, or there's 2 people, it's my wife and me. So anyway, it was a fantastic night, an absolute, one of the best nights ever. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it really was. And we've managed to spin out our wedding over not just 2, but 3 years, because I haven't had a stag do yet. I'm going to do that next year. And I'm thinking it might be slightly Zestology related, actually. I really want to do some sort of Wim Hof day with all my mates, where we do a bit of training and then we go out and have a big party afterwards. So if anyone's listening to this and does Wim Hof style training, will you get in touch with me? Because that'd be great. Anyway, on to today's podcast. Enough of the festivities, although I am still definitely buzzing from how great it was. And today's podcast is with a former colleague of mine. Well, Ed Draper is a UK-based sports broadcaster and my former colleague at Sky. I recently left Sky, you probably know if you've been listening to the podcast, and I'm doing more of this and more writing as well, and I'm really enjoying it actually, and you'll hear me talk about that career change a little bit. And we recorded this podcast for both my podcast and his Sport and Life. And on his podcast, he chats to people from the world of sport, health and fitness, business and more. So I guess I fit the bill, and I'm very excited and honoured to be invited onto his podcast, and here he is on mine.
Tony Wrighton, welcome to Sport and Life podcast. Welcome back. How are you? You had a big slurp or something. I presume that's a health drink, is it? Or is it regular coffee?
Thanks, Teddy. Good to be on your show. It's just a coffee, just a semi-healthy coffee.
Not your Bulletproof Coffee? You still doing that?
Yeah, I went through a real phase of the Bulletproof coffees, and I don't do it anymore now. I just have a black coffee. And the thing about Bulletproof Coffee is, there's no carbs in it. But for anyone listening, there's a lot of fat in it and there's a lot of calories in it. So very occasionally I'll have one, but not often now.
It's butter, wasn't it? Butter was in the Bulletproof, is that right?
Butter and MCT oil, yeah.
Ah, nice. And we were just talking before we started recording because we wanted to talk about energy, given your expertise and your passion on your Zestology podcast. We both had sort of slight stomach issues this week. And it's interesting, isn't it? Gut health, and not always the first point of starting, but it amazes you when you do feel unwell in the stomach, how it just drains you.
Do you know what? Yeah, because and obviously at the moment you get ill, you start to think, I've got COVID. It must be COVID. I haven't been ill in ages. Yeah. And you can probably hear in my voice, I've had a bit of a sort of, I think it's just the fact that when you've got a toddler, you just pick up things, don't you? But yeah, with the gut, I mean, for years, you know, that's like the moment your gut doesn't feel quite right, everything doesn't feel quite right. And what's interesting to me is how it affects me mentally as well. I just feel a bit down, actually. So, you know, I mean, people talk about that sort of axis between the gut and the brain, and there's more and more research showing how important it is, the link between the gut and the brain. Even when you look at sort of really serious illnesses that come, especially sort of dementia-related illnesses, there's a lot of research now suggesting that the link between a healthy gut and a healthy brain is very important.
And a healthy gut makes you make healthy choices as well. Is that what the connection with the brain is? It actually influences your thinking and decision making.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny because we were going to meet in person, weren't we? And in the end, I was like, mate, at the moment, you don't really want to be meeting up with me when I feel a little bit under the weather. And we went out last week, had a sort of a massive greasy pizza. And obviously you're going to feel a bit rubbish the next day. It's just what happens. The thing is, I'm not going to give up eating greasy pizzas. That's the problem.
No, you have to indulge yourself sometimes, don't you? Just tell us your quest to discover the sort of secrets to maintaining energy and creating energy. Give us the backstory of that for people who don't know, because you were really poorly, weren't you? Was it 6-7 years ago now? Yeah,
well, obviously I came on your podcast previously, but I can't remember how much I went into it.
No,
but, I was at Sky at the time. I've obviously left now, but I had to take quite a bit of time off because I went to the jungle and I got this tropical virus. And as it turns out, the symptoms of this tropical virus and the sort of post-viral symptoms are quite similar to COVID and long COVID. And I ended up sort of getting over the virus quite quickly, coming back to work, and then getting all these dreadful symptoms, including fatigue, and having 3 months pretty much in bed. And at the sort of deepest, darkest moment, I thought, well, I've got a bit of time alongside my work at Sky. If I get the chance, and if I get back to something approaching full health, I'll do a podcast, and I'll sort of go on a bit of a search for the things that can give me more energy.
And how do you feel now? Because I had glandular fever when I was 18, and that affected me, I think, for 3 or 4 years, whenever I was potentially run down to university or overdoing it, you know, partying or whatever. I would get a relapse of almost like a flu-like symptoms. So I think, is that something that you found, or do you feel 100% now tip top?
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I got tested for glandular fever, and one of our old colleagues who's left now at Sky told me he had glandular fever about 18 and it changed his life. And I mean, I won't say his name on the podcast because I don't want to sort of, he might not want to reveal it, but he told me, because he was a very laid back chap, and he told me that it completely changed his outlook on life, having glandular fever. He just sort of realized that things weren't so important. And I think it was similar to that, but also for me, there was quite a battle with what was going on in my head as well, because, you know, you have to admit that actually, if you're worrying about your health all the time, you can't let yourself relax to get better.
Yeah.
So that was sort of part of the battle for me, just sort of doing less and relaxing. And I know you're on board with so much of that as well.
Well, yeah, because mental energy, that's an interesting one, isn't it? The more we think about things, and actually the more we worry about not having energy, it can drain our energy. It's quite interesting, the mindset component, isn't it? And being peaceful and we've talked about meditation, but it's almost trying to meditate throughout the day, isn't it? And be in the moment, because it seems when you're out of the moment, that can be very draining.
Yeah, and I went to see this guy, you know, he specializes in fatigue and NLP and this sort of weird and wonderful thing called tapping, which I've spoken about on my podcast before. And it's essentially emotional freedom therapy. And they tap on various areas of your face and body. It is weird. And I wasn't really into that bit at all, but I thought, well, I've got fatigue, so I need to go and see him. And he said, you know, one of the really hard things that people have to confront when they come and see me for the first time is the fact that in some way, there is a link between what's going on in their mind and their symptoms. And he said, that's not to say that you haven't got a load of physical symptoms. I know you have. And it was such a sort of relief once he started telling me that, and I started to understand that. And so that was quite a big thing for me, actually. Like within about 10 minutes, I sort of thought, do you know what? For the first time, I feel like I might be able to get better again.
Well, that's a great, and that then sort of snowballs and gains momentum, doesn't it? With energy, what have been the foundations for you? And I want to talk a little bit about NLP as well, because you've written books on that, and how that interplays with energy, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. But do you start with sleep? Were you aware of that early on? Because it almost feels like there's been an avalanche of research into sleep. Bizarrely, in the last 4 or 5 years, I think that there's a counterculture movement, because we've often been very disrespectful to sleep in the Western culture, haven't we? Is that where you started, or is that later?
I can't remember if I told you. I met Matthew Walker, the sleep researcher.
Yeah, I listened to it.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I interviewed him for my podcast, and ironically, he'd had very little sleep the night that I met him, because he'd booked an Airbnb opposite Tiger in central London. And all the patrons are coming out at 4 o'clock in the morning and waking him up. But it's quite with energy. It's, because there's a lot of weird and wonderful supplements you can take and things you can do and ice baths and all the rest of it. Actually, it's quite the boring stuff sometimes that works, isn't it? And definitely with sleep, there's no doubt to me that I could either take 16 supplements today, or I could get an hour's extra sleep tonight. And the extra sleep would make more of a difference to my energy levels. So that is something, and I think that whole concept of sleep hygiene is something that is increasingly important, because most people, let's face it, take their mobile phones into the bedroom with them. And the last thing they look at night and the first thing in the morning is their mobile phone. And that is sort of probably not that good an idea for most people, for lots of reasons. For what it's doing to your brain, for what the bright light is doing to your eyes and your melatonin production. And then in the morning, there's something wonderfully relaxing about waking up in the morning and not having a phone in the room, and just letting the thoughts appear in your mind. You start to think about the important stuff and the deep stuff, as opposed to, I don't know, checking the football scores, which you can do later on anyway. But is it really something you need to do in the first 3 minutes of your day?
Yeah, because that can set you back a little bit, can't it? That if you do that, if you ever look at your phone early on and there's a sort of message that's stressful.
Oh God, all the time. And it's like, it's such a battle with me to leave my phone downstairs. But I always have a better sort of last hour before bed if I do. And I always have a better first hour in the morning. And this morning I woke up and no one else in the house was awake, which was lovely. And I read my book for half an hour in the morning because there was nothing else to do. I didn't have my phone in the room. It's just such a peaceful way to start the day.
Nice. Yeah, I think that is and the smartphone is an energy challenge we've had, isn't it? And I think if you've got that kind of addictive brain or an active brain, you're very conscious of getting stuck in those loops of communication, be it on a Instagram or WhatsApp, or there's so many platforms that you can engage with that. I think that's a big draining factor potentially, isn't it? You've got pretty good etiquette, I think, because even when I send you a message, there's not always that cut thrust of immediacy, because sometimes you can be in these immediate conversations with about 50 people, and by the end of the day you think, I haven't done anything, but I'm exhausted.
When you message someone and they message you straight back, it's just sort of it sort of makes me feel a bit panicky.
Like you're in it now, this is it.
Do you store up your WhatsApps until you're in front of a computer and you can sort of batch reply quicker and then get through them quicker?
I don't on a computer, but I mute them and then I try and go through them on the phone. But you're probably right, because I think energy-wise, a phone is definitely more draining. I don't know whether it's the size of the screen or the way that you look at it, or the fact that on a phone there's multiple messaging platforms that you can actually.
I think it's just for me that it takes longer to reply. I can type quicker than I can tap.
Well, you do the voice messages as well, can't you? But then that can be quite lengthy if everyone's doing that. Sometimes it's hard.
Oh yeah, because then you need to. I've got to find 3 minutes to listen to this message from Teddy.
Yeah.
We'll be back with the podcast in 1 second, but today's podcast partner is Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. This is the magnesium product that I take, so I'm very pleased that it is my podcast partner on Zestology. It is the only organic, that's important to me, full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes 7 unique forms of magnesium. And really, I could wax lyrical on how great it is, but I think the best thing to do is just for you to try it. If you're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, one of the best things you can possibly do is start getting enough magnesium. But please don't rush to the shop and buy the first magnesium supplement you can see, because most magnesium supplements only use the cheap stuff that firstly goes through you, and that's, I don't need to go into too many details there, but secondly, it doesn't really work. You don't absorb it properly. There are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium, and you must get all of them if you want to experience the calming, sleep-enhancing effect and the nice effects on your muscle as well. I definitely feel differently when I take magnesium, and that is why I take it every day. So you can go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology. It's a special page just there. Use the code Zestology to save 10% when you try Magnesium Breakthrough. That is magbreakthrough.com/zestology. You'll get your exclusive 10% discount. You get the chance to get more than $50 worth of supplements for free as well. And as I say, I could wax on as much as I like about this, but really, you're just going to have to try it. It is an excellent magnesium supplement, and that is why I use it and recommend it. If you're in the UK, go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the same discount, Zestology10, wherever you are in the world. That's it. Back to the show. But then there's the other thing as well. I mean, you know, you and I have done late shifts for many years and shift work. And I know at the moment you're doing early shifts and late shifts on Sky.
Yeah.
And that's hard as well, isn't it? Because, you know, you get back and you're knackered anyway, and it's hard to get 8 hours sleep. And then you think, oh, I'll probably take the phone to the room with me. But I think it's time just disappears when you're looking at your phone. And that includes the sort of precious minutes before bed when you could be winding your brain down. And sometimes I even pick up the phone in the middle of the night. That's why I really, I've just got that sort of brain that is sort of alive so much that it needs the downtime. And the only way to get around it is to leave it out of the room. Then I don't have the option. It's the same with food. If there is food in this house, I will eat it. And it doesn't matter what it is.
Similar thing, isn't it? It's like a dopamine hit, though. That's the thing with the phone and the food is sort of like your brain has that compulsion to get to it, which isn't necessarily good for it. Yeah.
So do you bring the phone into the room with you?
I don't. I only do it on early shifts because if I have to get up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, like that anxiety of am I going to wake up? So I have my alarm, which my alarm 95% of the time I'm very happy with it. I've never had a problem. On the side of my bed, it's not got a sort of bright light or anything like that. But when it's early shift, you know, you get that sort of that real fear of not waking up for some reason, don't you? Then that affects your sleep anyway because you've got that anxiety. So it is difficult shift work, and I think coming down off a late shift, because when I'm not trying to sort of aggrandize what we do, but there is a performative element. You get adrenaline when you're on air, don't you? So to try and come down from broadcasting before you go to sleep can take a good while as well. How have you found sort of just having that, I guess, more equilibrium in the day?
Yeah, well, so obviously I left Sky fairly recently. At the moment, I'm doing more writing and podcasting and less late shifts and weekend. I mean, I've been doing weekend lates for 15 years at Sky. Yeah. And I must say that actually I am loving a more consistent bedtime. The one thing I thought about doing shift work is, you know, I mean, the World Health Organization does list shift work as a carcinogen. Yeah. And so I've always thought, well, that's a compromise I'm willing to make because I love working in broadcasting, and it is a compromise that I would make again. But in the meantime, the fact that I do have a bit more control over when I wake up and when I go to sleep, I'm loving, because shift work is hard. And obviously, you know, if you're staying up late, you want there to sort of be some reward. I'm not sure if I ever told you, but one of my first jobs in radio, I was on an early shift.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be on air at 5:30 in central London, and I missed all the alarms I set. I slept through 2 alarms. And at that point, this was the sort of late 90s. They even sent a taxi to pick you up. And I also slept through the taxi driver ringing the doorbell.
Wow.
I woke up at 7:15. But the thing is, it was all my fault because I'd I'd basically been to a party the night before and I'd had a few drinks. And it had been, you know, when you're in your 20s, you think you can do anything. And I'd had a few drinks and then a few more and then gone to bed and slept through everything. I woke up at 7:15 in the morning and I had all these missed calls from people like my mum who tuned into the radio station and I wasn't there. And they'd been saying, well, we don't know where Tony is, but hopefully we'll hear from him soon.
Oh, it's the worst. That's the worst feeling. It's funny that when you're early days in broadcasting. I remember we used to go on socials when I was at a radio station in London, and I remember one chap, sort of slightly worse for wear, but he was supposed to be doing the early sport, and he actually slept at the station after the social. And I think they managed to get him in at 7, but he was sort of just sort of comatose for the first hour, even though he was actually on site in the studio. But it's interesting that
I remember doing a Sky shift and I'd had 1 hour's sleep and I went on air. It was with Vicky. It was probably 2007 or 2008.
Yeah.
And It was the day that Setanta Sports launched.
Rival.
And the funny thing is that the Guardian actually wrote a review sort of comparing Sky very favorably to Setanta. Little did they know I'd had 1 hour's sleep and then gone in with Vicky, churned out 5 hours.
That's the problem, though, isn't it? Because you can get that adrenaline surge. And I think that's sometimes with broadcasting, or I guess people in sport would find this, performers. I don't know how you see that drain of adrenaline where you can have a high almost, can't you? And then there's a come down. Sometimes it's difficult for our family around energy, I think, because we're often our most energetic at work. And then you have that slow kind of ebbing of energy once you come off there.
Yeah. Because physically you can sort of get yourself through it. And that's why people often get ill when they go on holiday. Because finally their body sort of slides into parasympathetic nervous mode, and therefore you can start to heal and relax. And that is where sort of, you get ill because you actually, for the first time in ages, sort of coming down from that adrenaline high. And I agree, with broadcasting, there is that. You've got to be at a certain level at 5 to midnight. Otherwise, you're not going to make any sense. And then half an hour later, you're trying to go to sleep in bed. It's just not going to work, is it?
No, it's not. You do have to have a level of acceptance with that. And I think that's with health and energy generally. You've got a little boy as well. I think that's something you have to almost accept sometimes, isn't it? Because there's a tension that you like you say about the carcinogens of shift work with a baby. When people say to you, you need to get, this much sleep, you could be thinking, well, baby's waking up every 2 hours. I can't get that.
I know.
Sometimes there has to be a level of acceptance that you're not doing the most healthy or most energetic thing.
Yeah, the one thing that sort of keeps me going through those sleepless nights is the fact that, and at the moment, obviously having a bit of a bug, which I've clearly caught from him as well, is, it's going to be good for my immune system. Once I get over it, it's going to strengthen it.
That's a good way of looking at it. What about...
it's bright siding, isn't it?
Yes. What about movement and exercise? Where's the balance there for you to feel high energy, to not be drained? How much movement and exercise do you need?
I try and do as much as I can. And one of the things that we've found, so obviously, these are the boring things really, but they are the things that help the most. Sleep, movement and exercise, and sort of meditation of sorts. And we've found that it's a bit geeky, but we set up 2 WhatsApp groups, just me and my other half. And every day we'll message each other with the details of what exercise we've done and what meditation we've done. And then we count it up at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And it just sort of keeps you honest. If you haven't done it for a week, you haven't written in the WhatsApp group for a week, it's a separate WhatsApp group just for us two. And you're able to see how much exercise you've done over the last week and how you're getting on. And it's sort of, there's a slight competition element to it as well. And that sort of works quite well.
Yeah. So you're not doing ultra marathons though, one-upping each other. Because there is a level, isn't there, where, especially as you get older and you have commitments with kids and stuff, you can't do that sort of, that machismo of the wild amounts of exercise. There has to be a sort of... Yeah.
No, a lot of my exercise is quite gentle, I have to say. I try and do a lot of exercise, but a lot of walking and then a lot of sort of qigong or stretching or sort of light strength work. I've got an exercise bike here as well. And that sort of thing seems to work better for me. Yeah. Because again, like if you're doing really heavy exercise, that is stressing the body as well. And sometimes I just feel that's not what I need. But yeah, same time, I mean, when you've not got much time, you haven't got much time to do a sort of an indulgent 2-hour yoga class or something like that. What about you? Are you doing a lot of workouts? Or?
I've never done, I've studied quite often, I've studied sports science, but I've never done ridiculously intense stuff. Obviously I've played football to a decent level and liked the intensity of that, but I tend to just do
what was the decent level? I didn't know.
Well, I played for just university at Loughborough. I played up to the seconds and I played a little bit.
Did you? That's good.
Time. Yeah, I played.
Oh wow, that's great.
But just only getting paid 10 quid, 20 quid or whatever. It wasn't a big
amazing
deal. There's a level of fitness that you require for that. So I quite like playing football or intense stuff, but I generally just do basic cardio because I can't commit to a regular football thing. So I do 2 or 3 jogs a week and or maybe a swim. If I can get a swim, I think that's really good for the joints and I feel fantastic, particularly if I can swim outdoors. And then I do maybe a couple of weight sessions, maybe kettlebells. I've got a kettlebell here just for strength and resistance training. So I don't do anything too extreme. I only probably work out for half an hour at a time. And at the moment I haven't got a gym membership just because of, again, the time component. Whenever I went to a gym, I used to have a sauna and an outdoor pool, which is great, but I always go and I'd end up doing cardio, I'd end up doing weights, swimming pool. Yeah. So it ended up being 2 hours and it just became too much of a commitment. But I think, I'm a big believer in, yes, in the world of fitness, they want you to have overload, to adapt and to set goals and to progress, but I think there's also a sense of just movement for life itself and for feeling good, for feeling energetic. And
yeah,
interesting. And I had Caroline Williams, a woman journalist for the New Scientist, who's written a book called Move, which outlines just the actual best things in life. The health benefits aren't intense exercise. They are just not being sedentary, not sitting down for too long. So a lot of the people around the world who have the healthiest lives, that live the longest and have the less chronic illness, are people that just move around a lot during the day. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
I think you would like Rhonda Patrick's work. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I've heard on Joe Rogan podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And she talks a lot about energy and focus. And whenever she's going to do a big presentation, or she's going to, she needs to like really focus on writing a paper or something like that. She's an academic as well. She will do it fasted, so she won't have eaten, and she will do a sort of short but fairly intense bit of exercise beforehand, as there's so much research about how that sort of clears, and this is getting quite scientific, but I think it's beta amyloids out of the brain or something like that. But it literally makes your brain work better doing exercise. And that's certainly, I find, fasting and exercise, it not only makes my brain work better, but it elevates my mood as well.
Yeah, what is your fasting and nutrition protocol? What's the diet plan and how long you go without food?
Intermittent fasting. So we're recording this at sort of about 11:30 in the morning. I haven't eaten today. I've had a couple of coffees and I'll have lunch and dinner. And then that's every day. And I never really knew what to eat for breakfast. I never really, what is a healthy breakfast? I know cornflakes isn't that good for me, but what is good? And then I just ditched it. No, nothing. I mean, if I'm going out, I'll have breakfast, but we're actually going on honeymoon in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll be having breakfast then. I'll tell you that every day.
Absolutely. How long do you go there? 18 hours, is it roughly, without, or do you eat dinner quite late? How do you?
I'd say it's probably 17 to 18 hours. Yeah.
And that makes you
probably 18 hours.
Makes you more energetic and not hangry. You don't get hangry in the morning at all.
I say in the morning, it makes me feel way more energetic. And then the moment I've eaten lunch, I do notice my energy levels are down a little bit, especially if it's a sort of carby lunch, For me, it just works well. And there's a lot of research around intermittent fasting being good for energy. And there's a lot of research to suggest that, because our ancestors didn't grow up with a fridge in the kitchen full of food, they didn't eat 3 meals a day. They ate when they had food. And when they didn't, they would go quite long periods without it. Yeah. And we've tried longer fasts as well. We did one recently, which was the Prolon, which is the fasting mimicking diet. Okay. And that is 5 days of very little. You should look up Prolon, mate. It's quite fun, actually.
5 days of eating very little.
Yeah. So you have, they send you basically a big box and you've got all your meals in there for 5 days. And it's basically a load of posh cuppa soups and a couple of nut bars each day. And you have 800 calories the first day, and then it's like about 600 day 2, 3, 4, and 5. But what was interesting was, I measure my sort of heart rate stats with this Oura ring, and since that, my heart rate stats have consistently been way higher, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's definitely done me some good, and I felt I had a real sort of mood boost during it as well. And I have to say, we take for granted the food that we have. And when it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and all you've got to look forward to is a tomato cuppa soup until the next day, you really savor that tomato cuppa soup. So it's quite nice.
What about micronutrition, making sure you get the right vitamins and minerals? Do you supplement, and what do you supplement?
Yeah, I do. I do supplement quite a bit. Yeah, I take all sorts of different supplements, and I'm getting quite into CBD now as well.
Are you? Very relaxed.
Yeah.
What about
I like it. Yeah.
What about vitamin D as we head into winter? Have you always supplemented that? Do you take that because that's connected to energy as well, isn't it?
I do, and I've been making. I mean, at the moment it's quite nice weather, isn't it? I've been making a real effort to get outside and sunbathe as much as possible at the moment to store up a bit of vitamin D for winter. But yeah, definitely supplement with vitamin D as well, and that's supposed to be very good for the gut lining as well. Talking about gut health, and that is in terms of energy so important. Do you supplement with vitamin D? I do,
yeah. I take a supplement called Immune Complete from a company called Cytoplan, which actually we have association with on the podcast, and in the introduction give a discount code. Just my father has worked as a consultant there for a long time. We still pay for our supplements, but he he's a firm believer of studying soil samples that you need to supplement. And vitamin D obviously is connected to the weather in the UK, the fact we wear clothes. But for him, he believes selenium and zinc are really important and quite deplete in UK soils. So he thinks that you supplement with selenium and zinc. So it's an interesting debate. You have
how much zinc would you supplement with a day then?
I don't know the exact amount, but it's in this Immune Complete. I take 2 tablets of that, and it's there, and it's probably, I think it is your RDA, but obviously within that it has vitamin C as well in that supplement, and vitamin D is part of it. But I think people have very kind of conflicting thoughts, and there's lots of reasons why I think supplementation maybe makes sense. I think nutritional quality of a lot of the food, even if you are trying to be nutritionally conscious, I'm not sure if you look at the soil whether that is the case. And also some people, if you're not intensely exercising and you're trying to not put on weight, your calorific intake may not be that high. So actually compared to those hunter-gatherer ancestors you talked about, we may be consuming less because we're not as mobile and not as energy drained. So I think the reason we might need the micronutrition to just be topped up. But it's an interesting debate. I've had doctors on who don't agree with supplementation, or maybe just vitamin D they'll agree with, but not other stuff. So it's an interesting area that people probably have to just look at themselves and take supplementation and see how you feel.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I definitely track everything I take. I mean, I'm a sensitive soul in that I notice when things work and when they don't. And I really feel when something's good and when it's not. And that's why I've been enjoying CBD, because I do notice a difference in sort of night. I tend to take it at night. I just feel a little bit more relaxed and I sleep quite a bit better as well, especially later in the night. I sleep deeper. So that for me is I'll put it sort of normally drops under the tongue. Yeah. Okay. So 25 milligrams is quite a sort of a relatively high dose, but it's basically cannabis without the THC in it, and it's legal and you can get it all over the place, and it's great.
Yeah, it's interesting, the sort of development of cannabis around the world and actually legalization of that in some areas. What about neuro-linguistic programming?
I would like to see you to take 250 grams of that and then go on air and try and make some sense.
Very, very chilled, I'm sure. What about NLP? Because you've written, I don't know how many books you've written total, because we need to talk before you go back your most recent book, but in NLP you've written a lot of books on that. How do you define neuro-linguistic programming, and how does that interplay with energy?
So I wrote 3 books with Virgin Books, and they've been published in 12 languages. And then the 4th book I brought out recently, and because my publishing company already sells stuff on Amazon and that sort of goes quite well, I published it through my publishing company, and that's called When Life is a Bit Meh, You Need Energy. So NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, is really a study of how people do things well. It's a terrible name, but it's used a lot in sort of sports and therapy and education and sales and marketing and all sorts of different areas. And I love it. I started training in it almost 20 years ago, and still find it a fascinating area. And I mean, I probably told you the story why I first got into it, but I was a radio presenter at the time, and I started using the linguistic techniques on my show. And the boss called me into his office one day and he said, "I don't know what you've done, but your listening figures have gone through the roof." So I was really just using the techniques to make people feel better about listening, and then sort of trying to get them to listen for a little bit longer. Yeah.
It's not a manipulative element to it, but it's just about it's almost being more tuned in, isn't it, to people in the environment, I suppose. And I guess less absorbed in your mental chatter.
Yeah. And the word manipulation is a interesting one, because when you look at communication, you could argue that all communication is manipulation. Yeah. Because right now we're talking, and if I've got a point I want to make, I'm going to make it the best I can. Well, if I've got a better way to make my point, I will use it, and that is what NLP is all around, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. Does it help the energy side of it, do you feel? Does it give you mental clarity?
Yeah, and a lot of the techniques crossover. It doesn't really give me clarity as such, but a lot of the NLP techniques help me, for example, track whether an energy technique I'm trying is working well or not. So there's definitely crossover. But NLP is slightly different to energy, but there's plenty of crossover. Yeah.
Final thought, Tony. minimalism is something I'm interested in, but I know you like gadgets. How do you see the interplay with energy and gadgets, and what's contributing and what is a distraction for you as well? How do you assess that balance? Because we're all beset by that in the consumerist world, aren't we? What stuff, or is stuff good or is stuff bad?
Well, you being a parent, you will know that there's a lot of stuff involved, isn't there?
Yeah.
And every time they have a birthday or Christmas, there's just an avalanche of plastic.
And cuddly toys. And I find the cuddly toys terrifying. We've got about 300 for my daughter. And I think it just, we were actually having a sale last week. And then we came home and she'd been to a village fete with her grandma and bought 3 teddy bears. it was like you literally just feel like it's like kind of shipping water out of, a ship with a gaping hole in it. It just feels a little bit like that.
Yeah.
But I do feel, I think instinctively I was quite minimalistic. And I think as a parent, you almost feel more that way. You feel very kind of overwhelmed sometimes.
It is hard. And there's the author Paulo Coelho lives in Geneva, and he lives in a massive apartment in Geneva, and there's nothing in it. And when I read that, I thought, do you know what? That's quite nice, that,
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you've got 300 cuddly toys around.
No.
But definitely more space and less clutter, not only physically but virtually as well, I find to be really important. And it's funny, sometimes either you'll sort of think you'll covet something for ages. Like for ages, I really wanted to get an air fryer in the kitchen. I thought, you know what, it's going to be great. I'm going to be able to cook really healthily, and it's going to be like having some healthy chips, and I'm going to use that air fryer all the time. And I looked at all the options, and then I thought, I know, I'll get a cheap one on Amazon, and then at least I'm sort of not spending too much money. And I got this air fryer, and I used it a couple of times, and it didn't really come out very nicely. And then I thought, I've got this massive air fryer, and there's nowhere to put it in the kitchen, so it's got to sit on the work surface. Now it's cluttering up the whole kitchen. Yeah. And I wish that I'd never had the air fryer in the first place, so I'd just sell it on Facebook Marketplace.
Oh, good. Yeah, but that's the thing. As soon as you buy something, it becomes something that occupies a space, and almost occupies a mental space. And as you say, I'm actually in a cluttered spare room at the moment because we're going through more of my daughter's stuff and trying to surreptitiously get rid of it when she's at school. So it's but even in the back of my mind, the fact I'm sat in this cluttered room, I think subconsciously does affect you, and affects you. Probably
I agree.
Your energy as well.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you on that one, mate. And I suppose, I also find, like, if my desktop is cluttered, do you find that as well?
Yeah. When we used to revise at school, we had exams, you'd always try and clean your bedroom, tidy your bedroom up first, wouldn't you? That was a big part of it, I think. Yeah.
And my iPhone screen, everything's in folders. So there's very little on the screen. Just try to have less to distract me.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very clean sort of interface. And if there's loads of apps on there and my brain feels cluttered, I just think I've got that sort of brain.
And quickly, I know we've got to press on, but you mentioned the apps and the phones, social media. We didn't talk specifically about that. How do you interact with that? Because you have got your podcast, you've got your writing, and your email. Actually, it's fantastic. Your weekly email, just little health tips and probes and things. I really enjoy that. How do you manage social media to use it, not get used by it, in terms of your energy?
In terms of energy, I know that social media is not very good for me, but I've sort of still get involved, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And I think, like, it's very easy to be high and mighty about it, but ultimately I sort of want Instagram on my phone because I use it for my business, and I quite like having the occasional scroll. But then all of a sudden you'll find you've been sitting on the loo for 25 minutes looking at pictures of someone else's dog, and it's just
you're late for the next appointment or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, it's so needless, and it's so wasteful, isn't it? It's just like a real downtime. And you think, if I'd been reading my book, that would have been a nice way to spend 25 minutes. But instead, no, I was looking at Ed Draper's Instagram.
Oh yeah, well, that wouldn't take you 25 minutes. I think that'd be very, very monotonous. But Tony,
I don't have that many rules around it, but if I did, it would probably help.
Well, it sounds like you're pretty disciplined anyway. You're not getting too absorbed, not losing hours at least, and losing energy in doing so. Give us a steer on where we can follow you then, and where the best place is, and where we can get that email, if people can get that email update, which is all about energy and just little tips each week.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's TonyWrighton.com is my website, and the podcasts are there as well. And then the email you can sign up for through there. And it's just everything that's sort of been interesting me. More recently, I've just loved mouth taping. So I've been posting about that quite a bit. It has massively changed the way that I sleep.
Oh, what is it? You actually tape your mouth up?
Yeah, I mean, I read this book by James Nestor, which has been a huge bestseller, and then I got him on my podcast as well. And it's all about the power of breath, and the book is called Breath as well. And he basically says, over the years, humans have developed faces which aren't very good for breathing and not very helpful for breathing. And if we tape our mouths at night, then we breathe as we should do through our noses. So I was very nervous, and the first night I sort of woke up in the middle of the night and thought, oh my God, am I choking or something like that? And now I could not go to sleep without taping my mouth at night. It is a revelation. I sleep so much deeper. Brilliant. So that's the sort of thing I've been focusing on. But you must try it. It's great.
And you sleep and you snore less or more, or is it irrelevant to sleep snoring?
Oh, it definitely helps with snorers because you're breathing through your nose and not your mouth. And I didn't think I snored, and I didn't think I breathed through my mouth, but I obviously do because it just helps the depth of sleep. And the other weird thing that it helps with me a lot is I go to the loo a lot less in the night, which is the sort of thing that you don't think you're going to talk about on a podcast very much, but it's important because it affects your sleep, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and then sometimes you can't go back to sleep afterwards for a bit, so that's a big thing. Yeah, Tony, absolutely.
But you must try that. I want to know what you think on that.
Was it regular gaffer tape you use, or is there a special tape you use to do it?
Gaffer tape would rip your lip off.
Yeah.
It's a surgical tape. It costs about £3 on Amazon. Okay. I can send you a link, but I think if you just go for, I think it's called surgical tape.
Okay.
But it's, designed for use on the skin, and you rip off a tiny little bit. One reel will last you a year and a half. Put it on your lips at night. And the first night, it's a bit weird, but actually you sleep. It feels like you're breathing in the cool air of a forest. It's lovely.
You can just imagine my wife's face now when I rock up with that for the first time. But it'll be, I'll try it. Why not? I should try that. Tony,
we both do it. We both do it here. And then we just, sometimes we'll have a chuckle when we both put the mouth tape on, and then we can only sort of say,
nice. Well, my wife has no problem sleeping. She's a 9 hour, if my daughter permits it, a 9 hour a night kind of.
Oh, great.
Well, so yeah, she's very
lucky her.
Naturally, yeah. She's a great natural sleeper, although it can be stressful if she doesn't get the sleep. So that's the flip side. Yeah. But Tony, been an absolute pleasure having you on. Great conversation. We'll have to meet up soon in person, have a coffee. We kicked our stomach bugs and I recommend people to listen to your podcast Zestology as well, because it has been really helpful, and I suppose helpful as well.
Yeah, and yours, Ed, because I may well use this for my podcast as well. So can you just tell my listeners what your podcast is and where they can find that and everything else you do?
Yes, my podcast is called Sport and Life, and it is available on iTunes, Spotify, and a host of other platforms now. And mine is not opaque per se, but I generally started it because my interest was naturally in sport after being a broadcaster like you, Tony, for 15, 20 years now. And what we still get out of it as we get older, what the metaphors are, what the lessons are. But it's sort of branched out because I had a sports science background, and I've been studying fitness and well-being a lot on the side, into sort of a lot of fitness conversations, health conversations. My father being a sort of a micronutritionist, it's always sparked my interest. So it's a wide range of topics and conversations, and hopefully there's a sort of thread of just reflecting on life and maybe little tweaks and tips and things that we get from it. But I enjoy it. I enjoy having these conversations. It's fun.
Me too. And it's nice it's very different to what you and I've done for so many years on Sky. Yeah. And I think that actually, there's a good reason that Sky is the way it is. We can't just sort of freewheel in quite the same way if you're presenting a serious news story. But it's nice to have a little bit more personality. And that's one of the things I've enjoyed about leaving, to sort of focus a little bit more on how I develop that side of my broadcasting career as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant not to have someone in your ear. And it's just the reality of linear media in particular, where you've got this advertising junction you're hurtling towards all the time, and people have a running order. So there's always an anxiety of a filling time. So there's always a pressure to move on, isn't there? Whereas I think podcast provides that ability to just have the closest thing to a normal conversation, where you can actually dig into things to in depth. Because I'm sure you had the experience when you're broadcasting where someone says something really fascinating that you want to come back on, find out more, and then you have to go, we're sorry, thanks, great to speak to you. Back in a moment with the cricket results or whatever.
No, it's when the producer says, all right, that's the last one. Come on, move on, mate.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Which is because they're under duress and pressure to fit the time constraints, aren't they? But you're right that I think, having that freedom to, explore your interests and just delve into things. And it seems that, the podcast world, there's millions of them. But I think the art of doing them, obviously it's great when people listen to them. But I think in actually holding these conversations, I find it beneficial to me. I'm sure you probably find something similar. There's a connection with people.
I mean, there is. I mean, the thing is, the sort of joke is that everybody's got a podcast now, and they have.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's quite a nice way to make contact with new people that you're interested in. And then for us, we've had a great catch up over the last hour. We've just happened to have recorded it, don't we?
And it's fine. I don't know whether it's better on Zoom because I know you so well. How do you find out, particularly in the COVID era? Do you try and do it in person? Is it better energy in person, or do you feel that?
Well, obviously, since COVID, it's mostly been on Zoom. It used to be probably 70% in person, and I've done very few in person recently. But I hope it'll get back to something approaching that. And now I'm sort of working out of offices in Central London as well, and we've got a podcast studio there as well, so we can do them in Central London too. But we'll just see how it goes. But it's better in person, isn't it? And I've recorded them all over the world as well, which has been amazing, and done a lot in America, which has been brilliant. And I'd love to get back to doing that, but still we can't travel to America. So we'll see if that can change as well.
Yeah, and energy considerations, though, sometimes Zoom is better than nothing, isn't it? Because if you are tired, particularly like you say with the shift work, driving an hour and a half to interview someone isn't necessarily the best use of your time off, whereas you can connect in Zoom and do an hour chat and feel invigorated by it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Tony, good to speak to you. Catch up soon.
Thanks, Ed. Speak soon. That is it. Thank you for listening. Next week, one of the world's most respected coaches, Jenny Rogers. She's absolutely fantastic. She is world-renowned and superb as well. And I've recorded that podcast already, and I'm looking forward to bringing you that next week on Zestology. Just a quick reminder, Magnesium Breakthrough. Last night, in the middle of the night, I had to get up and take an extra magnesium because I did a lot of sport yesterday. And when I say sport, table tennis. And I went and played loads of table tennis. I was playing for 90 minutes or more. I was really sweating. And afterwards, I think I just needed more magnesium. Magnesium is one of my absolute go-to supplements. And I tend to use a bit of spray on my legs as well, and Magnesium Breakthrough. And last night in the middle of the night, I just felt like I need more. So I got up, took another one, and then slept like a baby until morning. You can go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology and get a big chunk of change off, and use the code Zestology10. And if you're in the UK, go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the same discount code. That's it from me. My post-wedding voice is just about giving out, so I will see you next time.